As I'm thinking of things to do in the videos that I produce here, I often try and think in a logical way, kind of a reasoned way, in order to present the information that I want to get out at that particular time. And I like to think through things, and I know a lot of the people that leave comments are thoughtful beings as well, and a lot of the comments are fabulous, well thought out, and they take a position themselves. And this is all perfectly normal, in my opinion, for intelligent people who care about the world, care about their environment, care about their families, and really have a stake in their own future. And in proving that, you really show that you are committed to, living the good life, living a life in your country. And again, this is totally brilliant. It's with a profound sense of not just unease, but surprise as well. And I'm struggling to find the correct word for it. I'm going to latch on to the word suicidal, and I'm not going to try and frame it in any more intelligent way than that. Europe is undergoing this suicidal need to drive itself off a cliff. And the recent announcement by the French government about accepting Gazan refugees, and it looks like a couple of 100,000 will be coming to France, or going to France might be a better way for me to phrase it if I'm from England. And, when you stand back and look at that, of course it could be more. It might be a lot more than 200,000. 200,000 is the figure that's been bandied around as the amount of people in totality that may arrive at some point, either, maybe a little bit of time ago and looking into the future. But of course, by all estimates, there is a couple of million people. And so these estimates that were often given by politicians, they often turn out to be ridiculously small at times, because they don't want to tell us that 500,000 people will be coming here. And when you look at the people of Gaza and, what's happened to their land there, lots of it is in rubble, and, life is hard there. And obviously you've got people like Hamas and other terrorists running around, and rampant Islamism everywhere. Of course, Europe is going to look quite attractive to those people. But should we take in those people? And the answer is no, we shouldn't. And you may say to me, well, that's quite cold. And you're correct in that assumption. It is ruthlessly cold and ruthlessly direct. I don't want any Gazans coming to the United Kingdom, because it's already been proven in the past that when Europe accepts Palestinians into their countries, they commit crime en masse. And so, really, Europe wanting to do this is very, very strange. I'm trying my best to try and see a reason why this should be the case, and I'm just failing at every point. I don't understand why Europe would commit such an act of self-harm.
I'm not trying to claim that, people in Gaza have got it easy. I'm not trying to claim that every single person in Gaza is some kind of Hamas-supporting monster or anything like that. But we do have some data on this. And Denmark took in 321 Palestinian refugees in 1992. By 2019, 64% of them have been convicted of a crime, including 34% of their children too. And a very large proportion are on welfare in Denmark. And I just wonder, Alan, whether or not this is really quite bad news for Europe if France decides to do this.
Well, one could argue that what the French do is what the French do. But as we just stated, the reality is that what the French do affects us. So we do have a stake in this. We do have a concern. And the figures you've just quoted are very real. And we know full well that there are, Hamas sympathizers among many Hamas sympathizers among Gazan population. And if you're starting to develop an approach to saying, well, come over here, we just do not know enough about the people coming to determine whether they might be a security threat or whether they are indeed simply people trying to flee from a very difficult situation. The fact we don't know, though, gives us that problem, don't we? The last thing we need is to import more problems into this country. We have enough problems of our own without seeking to bring more in across the borders.
What would it mean, I think, specifically for maybe the Jewish community in Britain, who I know are already facing huge amounts of anti-Semitism, an increase in anti-Semitism as well? Is there a concern here?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the one thing one can obviously say, regardless of what we do or do not know about the views of many Gazans, they are not seemingly friendly to Jewish people. That's an obvious point. And I think if you bring people, or people come over here illegally or legally, whichever way they come in, either way, if you bring in people with strong views of that way, it creates a very difficult social situation. We've already got the effects of that. There was a report, of course, earlier this week showing how anti-Semitism was rife now in middle-class Britain, but we know that's not the only place it's rife, and it's been a resurgence here. When it comes to community relations, it's clearly a problem if we're going to bring people in who we know are ill-disposed towards existing residents of the UK, existing citizens of the UK.
I think a lot of people will be thinking, okay, they look at some of the horrific scenes going on in Gaza, and they feel as though there's people there that clearly deserve some help and all of that, and have maybe been caught up in various different things, and that is a problem. And a lot of people, I think, scratching their heads to go, okay, but why is this Europe's problem? So are there not some countries in the Middle East, in the Arabic world, where it would make more sense for a load of Gazans to go and seek refuge than France, and then probably a small boat into Britain?
Now you've hit the nail on the head here, because the tragedy for the Palestinian people is how badly they've been treated by other Arab nations within the Middle East. It is extraordinary that, as you've just pointed out, they haven't been able to go to countries nearby and escape a war-torn situation. And instead, it somehow becomes Europe's problem, whereas there is plenty of room in nearby countries to do this. But you'll know that for decades, Palestinians have not been granted, sort of citizenship in places where they have been living for those decades, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, Egypt, and those countries don't want them. That's a brutal truth. So it's a big issue when you have your own neighbours saying no to you, and that needs to also be considered and dealt with, because that's a more effective solution, isn't it?
And of course, right at the end of that clip, you get the most pertinent point. There were a lot of points raised there in that excellent little interview. And sometimes when you listen to people like this gentleman here, it makes you wonder why our politicians don't sound like this man. Calm, reasonable, thought out, and not scared to give his opinion, and just being truthful and honest. And this is one of the reasons why people like Farage and other people like that are so popular, because people get the sense that they're talking truth, as opposed to saying whichever thing that they need to get through whatever interview that they're in. And that's one of the diseases of modern politics. But I move on from that. How many of these Gazan refugees are Hamas operatives? Or to put it more blunt, how many of these Gazan refugees are terrorists who will be looking to do Europe harm? And the answer to that is, we don't know. We don't know how many of these people will want to kill Europeans. We don't know how many of these people will want to murder Jewish people in the streets. It is a massive security risk to invite 200,000 people into your country who, to be fair, have previously voted in a terrorist group to rule their nation. Now, a lot of people do come at it from the perspective of, oh, well, the people were ruled in Gaza by Hamas. And I don't subscribe to that notion. If you've had some people in power for a decade and a half, as they did, I believe it was around 2007, 2008 that Hamas were voted in by the people. And even if they weren't voted in, even if Hamas took control, as it were, the people of Gaza have had a long time to build a resistance. And in essence, they've gone along with it. In lots of studies and surveys, it transpires that a huge amount of people in in Gaza are openly supportive of Hamas. So they openly support terrorist groups, a lot of them. And you just had to look at the pictures around October 7 to watch the pictures of young ladies being driven, or their mangled bodies being driven through the streets of Gaza. and watching all of the small children spitting on these people to understand the depth of feeling that the people there have against certain groups of people and the support they show for Hamas. And so, no, you reap what you sow. I don't believe that we owe Gaza anything. I don't believe we owe Hamas anything. But just to develop the point that these gentlemen here were just saying, you've got Syria, you've got Lebanon, you've got Jordan, you've got Egypt. These are people who are in direct partnership with the land, if you like. These are people who are adjacent to these countries here. And for a long time they've said, we don't want these people in our borders. These are large countries. They could have accepted, if they really wanted, up to a few 100,000 each. But they didn't want them. And why did they not want them? The reason why these countries didn't want them is because they know who these people are, and these people have terrorist sympathisers and terrorists right the way through the populace. That's why those people don't want them. And isn't it curious that of all of the places in the world that should stand up and say, please, we'll take in lots of people here, we'll take in all the refugees, that it should be France, who's currently undergoing massive demographic change. Again, we come back to the same question, the same reasons why Europe should choose to inflict this level of self-harm on its native population. And yet again, I can't come up with any logical or sensible reason why this should be the case. It baffles me. And, this self-destruction, it's almost akin to me waking up every day and removing one brick from my house every single day, or even 10 bricks a day at the rate that Europe's going, and then wondering why my house fell down at some point in the future. It's suicidal madness, and I'm at a loss every time I talk about it. Thanks very much for your time.